From its questionable looking beginnings back in the day, the X5 has grown into one of the most handsome luxury SUVs on the market, and it packs the drivability to back this up. Starting at around 131 grand, this xDrive 30D model isn't exactly cheap, but represents the entry point into the X5 range, and argues a good point for diesel power in the modern age. Not a lot has changed on this X5 since the introduction of the 4th generation vehicle in 2019, but it's worth noting that now it gets these LED matrix headlights as standard. Somewhat reminiscent of Henry Ford's rule, if you want this X5 in any colour that isn't Alpine White, buyers are going to have to shell out an extra $1,500. And along the same lines, the X5 is offered as standard on 20-inch alloy wheels, but these 22s here will set buyers back an extra $3,000. When it comes to the back of this X5, probably the most impressive element is the split folding tailgate that opens from the top and the bottom that gives access to 650 litres of space for the second row up, but that increases to 1,870 litres of space when you've got those seats folded down. If you're in need of a couple of extra seats, BMW also offers a 7-seat option, but adding an extra 2 seats back here is going to set you back an extra 2.5 grand. There are also a couple of creature comforts back here, including a 12-volt power outlet, a retractable luggage cover, and underneath this tray here, which is operated via a gas strut I might add, you've got a space saver wheel and also a luggage net. As with the exterior of this X5, not a lot has changed on the interior since 2019, but that's not really a bad thing, because this feels very modern still. Drivers get a large 12.3-inch digital display cluster behind the steering wheel with BMW signature gauges around the outside, and they also get another 12.3-inch infotainment display over here, which has both wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity. Like all modern BMWs, the X5 gets quite a chunky steering wheel, which isn't a bad thing, but I tend to find the smaller ones a bit better. And the multi-function buttons are great to use, but sometimes, because there is a scroll wheel on both sides, drivers might find themselves getting confused between the volume buttons and this little scroll wheel here. Although these tactile controls for the infotainment screen are handy to use, they feel somewhat reminiscent of Lexus's infamous touchpad, and feel somewhat redundant in the age of the touchscreen, so honestly I wouldn't be surprised to see these things phased out in a few years. As with these front seats, they are actually quite bolstered and offer a lot of support when it comes to cornering. They're very comfortable, but they are what you'd expect for a $130,000 luxury SUV. As for practicality, the X5 gets a lot of storage across this front row. You've got diagonal mounted cup holders in the door cards, which probably will take a large bottle, 2 cup holders up here, and a large bin here with a USB-C port in it. So charge your iPads, charge your phones, it looks great. As with most luxury SUVs, head and legroom is plentiful back here in the second row of the X5, but what's more notable is the extra legroom that this middle seat gets due to the amazingly flat floor back here. There are also a fair few gizmos and pieces of tech back here that make living in the second row more easy, including second row climate controls, power outlets, USB-C ports in the back of the seat, and a port for a tablet holder that can be purchased from dealers for an extra $210. Soft touch materials are generously appointed throughout the second row. You've got large door bins with a decent sized cup holder here for large water bottles, and then when it comes to the multi-function armrest, you've got this tray here as well as a pair of cup holders, and who doesn't love that? When it comes to the cost of keeping this big X5 running, BMW claims a combined fuel economy of 7.2 litres per 100 kilometres, which isn't bad for a decent sized SUV like this. In real world testing, we were able to achieve 7.5 litres per 100 kilometres, but that was through a mix of city, highway, and pretty spirited backroad driving. As for the warranty, BMW offers a 3-year unlimited kilometre warranty across all its vehicles, but that isn't as good as some other luxury manufacturers who mostly have moved to 5-year plans. And when it comes to servicing, BMW offers a 5-year 80,000 kilometre service plan for $2,250. Over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $1,622 to comprehensively insure their new BMW X5. Your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your age, driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. On the road, there's no denying the diesel nature of this X5. Under the hood sits a 3-litre inline-6 turbo diesel engine that makes 195 kilowatt and 620 Nm of torque. And you might be thinking, that's a lot of torque. And I can tell you that it is. Because this thing, like most diesels, it doesn't rev a lot, but in that lower rev range, it's a rocket. It's an impressive machine. In terms of performance, BMW claimed that this will hit 100 kilometers an hour in 6.5 seconds from a standing start, but we found this to be slightly on the modest side because in testing that we did, we found that it'll hit it in 6 seconds flat, which is a serious pace for an SUV of this size. One thing we didn't test was the top speed, but BMW claims that sits at 230 kilometers per hour. Speaking of the abundance of torque that this xDrive 30D has, obviously it rockets you off the line from a standing start, but it's not only that. In corners, when it's working with the transmission, the power surges so nicely and it's a satisfying way to get back to speed. I guess I'm kind of a sucker for diesel engines, but this one seems especially good. In terms of handling, this X5 sits on 275s at the front and 315s at the rear. And if you know tyres, you'd know that's some seriously wide rubber. And it works well with the powertrain. Off the line, even in not great conditions, I'm surprised at the lack of wheel slip it gets, but it also means that in corners, you've got a dependable ride, and I haven't experienced any wheel slip going around corners as of yet. As standard, this X5 xDrive 30D is offered with the M Sport pack, which means that it sits on adaptive M suspension as standard. Air suspension can be optioned, but that's an extra $1,700. With the adaptive M suspension, the ride is nice. It's firm, can be harsh at times over speed bumps, but as a whole, it's kind of what you expect from a luxury SUV. On that note about harshness, I can imagine that the 22-inch wheels that this rides on doesn't do much to help that, so opting for the 20 inches might be better if ride comfort's a priority. As with most BMW products, the X5 is offered with a range of dynamic driving modes. In these standard modes, the ride is cushy and the suspension is quite light, but I have to say that it doesn't offer much in the way of supporting the body roll because it is quite evident through the corners. As you'd expect, Sport Mode tightens up the suspension to minimise body roll, and the steering gets quite a bit heavier and you feel a bit more road communication through it. But as usual, this is sacrificed for a bit less ride comfort, and potholes and such are quite harsh on the old back. While exploring some decent driving roads in this X5, I found that the sweet spot was to leave the driving mode in comfort, but then knock the gear selector over to the sport mode so that the transmission would hold gears for longer and change gears earlier to keep you in that power band, but then you've also got the suspension being nice and cushy. And with that in mind, I'd argue that the nicer ride is worth the compromise. When it comes to safety, the BMW X5 gets an advanced safety suite as standard to keep you on the road. This includes adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, and automatic emergency braking, so you really can't be more safe. So while this xDrive 30D might be the most basic X5 that you can buy from BMW, it's still an extremely impressive machine. And at around 131 grand on the road, I wouldn't say it's exactly cheap, but after driving it, I can see why it's become a staple with Aussie buyers in the luxury SUV segment. So those are my thoughts on the BMW X5 X30D. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.